Hello, boys and girls. Board now, back with you for another new television review, and this is going to be my thoughts on the latest episode of David E. Kelley's HBO series, The Undoing. So, episode 2 of the first season. The episode's called Missing, or The Missing, so very original title. They're keeping it simple with these episode titles. I say the first season. I think this might just be a one-off, a limited season. I know it's based on a novel. And actually, before I get going on this week's episode, fun fact for you guys, because I learnt during the week that Nicole Kidman, the lead, is in fact the voice you can hear over the opening title. She is the voice of the singer singing the song. It's obviously a cover of a classic song, and yeah, there you have it. I guess not that surprising because she has done some singing in the past, and she does sort of have her fingerprints all over this show. She is the lead, she produces it, and yeah, I think singing the opening theme is just another way to have that sort of creative control, and just, as I said, marking yourself all over it. So fair play. She does a good job. You can't deny that. So this is an interesting episode because it's the sort of episode where it kind of sells the show and what it is, but at the same time, it's sort of the episode that might ring alarm bells as well, as maybe this doesn't quite have the substance which it's kind of making out to have, and it could be all kind of style and no real meat or anything. And it sort of feels like the sort of episode where it's like Kidman showing off her acting chops. The style, again, is all sort of there. There's some funny satire again, although not as much as in the first episode. I think, obviously, the first episode where it was setting up the plot, you got more of that stuff. But I do enjoy that stuff with Grace and her friends and some of the funny remarks around the school gate. Actually, the line of the episode is probably from this new mother at the school who wants Grace to counsel her daughter, and it's obviously the fallout from what's happened with the murder inquiry and stuff. And so the mother basically says, yeah, I would like you to counsel my daughter that this is her first sort of school murder, if you like, that first experience of that. So I thought that's a really hilarious line. And I mean, knowing this show, it may well not be the last, but there's funny little bits like Grace's sort of best friend who's like the lawyer. I think it's her. Oh, actually, it might have been one of the others. I think it was the one with the dark hair, because at the start of the episode, it comes out then Eleanor's husband has turned himself in. So at the time, they're sort of assuming that he did it, kind of thing. He's like the main suspect, because apparently the marriage wasn't going too well. But there's a funny line from one of Grace's friends says, yeah, I actually knew him for a while. I got to know him a bit, and I always had a funny feeling about him, like there's something off, sort of thing. So it doesn't surprise me. And I just love stuff like that, because it's almost the sort of thing which that sort of kind of, you sort of say in retrospect, or that sort of shadow type character might say. And of course later on it turns out then it's not him, or it seems as though it's not him, because he has an alibi, so the police let him go, and that's when Jonathan becomes the sort of lead suspect. But I think what happens in this episode is then it kind of plays out how you might expect it to, and the stuff with Jonathan in the episode is no great surprise. So of course Grace is frantically still trying to get hold of him. She can't. And there's some decent stuff with Grace and the son. The actor, I have to say, I don't really like. I think he's just... the way the son comes across is as this stereotypical sort of posh, innocent boy. But The actor I don't think is that great, but there's some decent stuff with him and Grace in this episode where he's like trying to reassure her about, well, maybe she can't get hold of Jonathan because he's on a flight, or that sort of thing. So he's kind of, on the one hand, making a strong defense for his dad, because Grace is like asking, I think the son's name's Henry. She's asking him all these questions because apparently Jonathan came in to see him on the morning that he supposedly left for this business trip, and says, I love you and stuff. And Grace is like questioning this. Well, is it usual for him to do it on the morning? Wouldn't he just do it the next night? So, I mean, what the episode gets across is that all these ideas are starting to race through Grace's head about what could have happened, because then she goes to the hospital and she talks to like another doctor, and the doctor, who, by the way, if you know David E. Kelly show, he was in The Practice as well, the law drama which Kelly did in like the 90s, early 2000s, but the actor was in that. He played a lawyer in that, so yeah, I guess they know each other. He pops up in a few things, to be fair, but yeah, he doesn't seem to know anything about like a convention in Cleveland, so that causes doubt. And then it's actually quite a nice little scene because it sets up the reveal later, because not only does he know about the trip to Cleveland, but he's clearly hiding a secret about Jonathan, and he like quickly walks away and says, no, sorry, I can't say any more. And this obviously sends Grace, like her mind, even more racing. But so it basically comes out then Jonathan, because the police or the detectives get hold of like his file and start looking through it, and there's all these accusations made about him from other patients, and you get this whole interrogation scene, which is quite an interesting scene, and Grace's reaction, because when they start going into details about like the case and these accusations, Grace kind of says, no, I don't want to know anymore. It's like none of my business, it's private, which is a very respectful thing for her to say, but I think it's also just her almost standing up to Jonathan, but at the same time that maybe the truth is too scary for her to face right now, which you can totally understand. So there's definitely a side of her which is very paranoid, or very almost convinced that there's something funny going on with Jonathan. So it's like, no, I know there's going to be something bad in that file, so I don't want to face it. But anyway, it comes out that Jonathan was treating Eleanor's son, and that there were certain dodgy accusations. I'm not sure they're ever quite clear on what they were, but certainly in the episode it kind of paints a picture of what they could have been. But then obviously the link is made because Eleanor's, she's been murdered and Jonathan's gone missing, or so it seems. And for a lot of the episode, the detectives don't believe Grace, and they're like constantly probing her, like they think she's hiding something, which obviously we know she isn't. But yeah, this stuff comes out, and then you see Grace's mind, like race into images of her husband and Eleanor like together and stuff. But yeah, it does come out in this episode that they were sleeping together. It was an affair, and that's not surprising. I think I kind of cottoned onto that quite sort of fast. So I think that's what I mean. I think the plot maybe is in danger of being too much about the style, too much about these kind of character interactions, which, as I said, are quite fun, but maybe overall it might not quite have the meat, or it might not have the big revelations or the twists and turns. We'll see, because obviously there still might be big reveals to come, because as it turns out, I don't think Jonathan's going to be the murderer, because I think that might be too sort of obvious. But what they basically do in this episode is that there's this interesting, like, almost point of view, like, direction to the scenes. Well, some of the scenes with Grace, like the police, when she's being questioned by the detectives in particular. And it's almost like this style where they're talking to her and they're interrogating her. And every now and again, it'll cut to a close-up of Kidman's face and her eyes and the paranoia. And you can sort of hear her, like, heavy breathing, like, nervously. In fact, there's a shot of her when she first walks in where she looks up at the camera, sort of thing. So that really captures her paranoia. So I think what it's kind of it's sort of playing with the idea of television as this kind of medium which can capture, like, raw human emotions, and people do say it's like the most truthful sort of medium in capturing people's, like, real feelings, because of the way you get the close-ups and stuff on the face and stuff. And I think it's also just playing with this idea that Grace is constantly under the spotlight in this episode. From the media, we see them at the school gates. We see, obviously, the detectives who don't believe her, who constantly question her. So she feels under constant pressure. And that's why Kidman is great casting, because she really conveys that through her facial expressions and stuff and the body language. I think there's an argument that at times these scenes are a bit too melodramatic. But I think that's partly to do with the genre, and this is kind of a soapy melodrama type thing. But once again, you do have Kidman strolling through these streets looking all kind of well dressed, and her scarf, like, flapping in the wind, and it is a lot of look at my face, look at me, kind of acting like kind of terrified. So it's one of those shows where really you kind of enjoy it for the style, but you wonder as things go on if there's going to be much more to it. But obviously, it's a very powerful sort of performance. One touch I did like is that at one point she meets... Come here, stop it. She meets her dad, and because she's been told by the school principal... Come here, stop it. She's been told by the school principal that it's maybe best if she doesn't come back to school at the moment. Best for her, best for the school. And again, this is another, like, big blow to Grace. And then she meets her dad, and I kind of like that they meet in, like, an art gallery as well, because it's, like, on one of those benches in an art gallery, and it's all kind of private and stuff. So I like that little touch. And her dad recommends that her and Henry stay at his beach house, because it's kind of private, it's out of the spotlight, it gets them away from town. Which you can understand, it's not a bad idea under the circumstances. So that's what they do. Another detail, actually, is that at one point Grace goes for a coffee with her friend, the lawyer, who I'm enjoying that actress, actually. It's another good performance, but she reveals that, like, months ago, Jonathan hired her to look over his case when, like, these accusations were coming out about him at the hospital, and she looked through it, and apparently at the time the woman making the accusations backed down, or there just wasn't enough to really pursue it anyway, but she just mentions it anyway and she kind of backs up the Donald Sutherland dad in saying, I think the best thing for you and Henry right now is to get out of town. So that kind of helps persuade her. And then what happens is the final scene is at, like, the beach house. And it does this thing of the camera, like, almost playing with us, teasing us. Is there somebody there? Is it just in Grace's head? Because she keeps, like, looking round and thinking that she sees someone in the distance. And at one point we see a figure upstairs, but again, it could just be the camera playing with us. I think Suzanne Barr, her direction is again on point in this, but eventually it's maybe no surprise it's revealed that it's her husband. Jonathan shows up. He sort of quickly runs into shot and he like muffles her and says it was. And I love the fact that he immediately goes into a tirade or like an explanation. It wasn't me. I didn't murder her. I had an affair with her. But I didn't murder her. And I just love this whole kind of this whole thing from him, because what happens is then he's like pleading his whole innocence and telling her telling Grace what happened, but at the same time he's like confessing to all these dodgy things, because he says, I had an affair with Eleanor, and what happens is I told her it's over, no more, and she became obsessive. Which is okay, fair enough, but then what happens is then he confesses to Grace that he slept with Eleanor on the night of like the auction that we've seen in the previous episode, but that he still didn't kill her. He found her dead later. But this obviously sends Grace over the edge, because she's like, it was in our bed and all this. But the highlight of this scene is Hugh Grant's overacting, because man, he really goes for it. Because normally he's a much more reserved sort of like kind of sleazy or charming presence, whichever way you want to look at it. But here, he kind of really goes for it, and it's kind of just Hugh Grant like sort of overdoing it, overacting. But I'm not going to lie, it was quite entertaining, and it's certainly believable, because you've got this guy with all these dark secrets, and then they kind of all sort of unravel. And I think that's why they can't cast Hugh Grant in that role, because it's this idea of this, he's almost too good to be true kind of guy. He's great looking, he's intelligent, he's got, he's a family man, he's got a high-powered career. But really there's these dark secrets lurking, and he's not as perfect as the surface seems to indicate. And he was also let go by the hospital 3 months ago. That's another thing to mention, because that's something that comes from his file. So all these things like build up in the episode to like freak Grace out, but it just ends with Grace calling the police. That's it. She's had enough. She calls the police and says, my husband's... Because Henry then comes out, and there's like an emotional like hug between him and Jonathan. But yeah, Grace just calls the police. It's like he's at the beach house. Come quickly. And again, it's quite a melodramatic ending, but they have it. So enjoyable stuff. I am enjoying it. I just don't think it's got like maybe the bite of Big Little Lies, or the kind of the depth maybe overall. So far what's happened, I think you could maybe predict, and isn't that predictable, but it's very stylish. There's some good satire to it, and obviously Kidman and Grant, as I said last time, are very well cast, but I think it will just get to a certain point where you hope then there is a little more to it. If this is going to be like 8 episodes or however long it is, you may hope then there's some big reveals to come, or just a bit more to it. But we'll see. I mean, so far I'm enjoying it well enough, and I think if you like Big Little Lies or that sort of thing, you're probably going to have a good time with this. So that's my feelings on episode 2 of The Undoing from HBO. You can let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you've seen it. Like and subscribe and all that stuff if you're new to the channel. Help keep these reviews coming. You can also ding the bell on YouTube. That should notify you of any new videos when they go live. So that's a good way to keep up with my content. And just a couple things to promote. Tonight, it is Tuesday. So tonight I will be on and I will be live streaming. And that is because, of course, we've got the big US election. So Trump against Biden, maybe the most important election in history, or certainly in a very long time. I will be up all night live streaming as the results come in, so you guys can join me for that. Also, on a TV note, this coming weekend we will have the second series of His Dark Materials, the fantasy series from HBO and the BBC. You can actually find all of my season 1 reviews on the channel now if you want to check them out in preparation. I actually enjoyed the first season quite a bit more than I was expecting to, so I am going to be doing season 2, or at least make a start on it. So His Dark Materials returns this weekend, and you can expect a review of the first episode, possibly Monday, something around that time. But yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.